All right, we still have people coming in. We had several hundred sign up for today's webinar, which it goes to show you that this is a pressing issue for many people and, something that is top of mind all the time on our journey. So I'm Allison Scoberg here with Consolidated Planning Group. Today we have Cynda Green with Text Parent to Parent, and she is going to be sharing with us about how to go about creating your own shared housing. So I want to give you guys just a couple of housekeeping items in case you're wondering. So today we're going from 12 to 1, so if you're planning your lunch hour or whatever, we will be finished by 1 o'clock. Today's webinar is indeed being recorded, and following the presentation today, you guys will get an email and you're going to get a copy of today's slides as well as a link for the recording. So if you want to share it with somebody else or you want to revisit some of these slides, you don't have to write down every single thing that we talk about today. We are in webinar mode, so we cannot see you or hear you, but we do know you're there and we're glad you're here. And we invite you to put your questions in the chat box and not be shy about your questions. We're going to get to as many questions as we can today. We may not get to all of them, but we will sure try, and we'll do that throughout the presentation. So don't wait till the end. If you have a question, put it in there. Don't be shy because somebody else probably has that same question, and we all certainly learn from each other. So Consolidated Planning Group, we are a holistic special needs planning firm. I had the pleasure of working with Ms. Cynda Green on our Texas Partners for Policy Making, and we were on the same team and worked together on that task force for 9 months. So I am happy and excited to be working with her today on this presentation. So at Consolidated Planning Group, we're nationally certified as Social Security advisors. We're also members of the Special Needs Planning Academy. And so what we bring to the table is we answer such questions like, how much money do I need to leave when I'm gone to care for my loved one with special needs? We're able to do such things as a Social Security analysis to tell you exactly when and how to pull the trigger on those benefits to maximize benefits for the whole household. So we like to say that we're the money, the attorneys, they're the paper. We don't do the legal documents or provide the tax advice that may be a CPA, but we're the money and the money in the right buckets. And we partner with organizations all the time. We have webinars on a regular basis. We have a YouTube channel. I put that in the chat box. And all of our past webinars live on our YouTube channel, so you can subscribe to that for free and kind of peruse the different topics. I think there's 200 webinars out there that might be relevant, such things like guardianship, special needs trust, SSI, and Medicaid. The topics are endless when it comes to planning for special needs, but we have them out there, and we also have live ones that are coming up. So having said that, Cynda, thank you for being with us here today, and I'm going to turn everything over to you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. So today we're going to talk about a parent's perspective on what it takes to set up shared housing or just individual housing, whatever that looks like. So we're going to kind of go through the steps today. There are a few resources later on in the slides. This presentation is really to get you to start thinking, right? Because oftentimes families are like, my son or daughter wants to move out and I have no idea what to do, right? So today I'm hoping to get you to start thinking of some of those. All of this information that I'm sharing came from parents who have actually set up either a shared housing or an individual housing situation for their son or daughter. Next slide. So Texas Parent to Parent, we are a statewide nonprofit agency. We provide information, support, resources to families who have children and adults with disabilities, chronic and mental health conditions, and other healthcare needs. So we are here to support you. We are a parent-run organization, so you're not alone. Okay. Next slide.
Let's talk about this for a second because you've got your website here. And one thing that I want to mention that I like is you guys have a lot of how-to guides out there. So we're not alone as parents. So it's not only is there a lot of information that you provide when families call in, et cetera, but you guys have a lot of guides on, particular topics. So I do invite you guys to check out that website and check out some of their guides because they may also be helpful to you in your journey.
Thank you.
And then also, when it comes to Texas Parent to Parent, I just want to mention this because don't you guys have an annual conference that's pretty awesome, like in San Antonio or something? Tell us about that really quick.
So our annual conference was held in July here in Austin. It was our first one back after 2.5 years. In the past, before the COVID happened, we had 700 to 800 people in attendance. This year was smaller, which we understood because, you know, the pandemic is still here. But there will be more information coming. I'm already working on dates for next year. And it has every topic that you can possibly imagine. At Texas Parent to Parent, we serve families who have birth to it. We don't stop an age, all disabilities, all abilities. So we are your go-to people. Again, we're parents, and we just want to make sure that you're getting the information that you need to support your son or daughter.
And is your conference always in Austin, or does it move around into the major cities? Or tell us about that too.
We spent a lot of time in San Marcos. We did 1 year in San Antonio. This year was the first year we were in Austin. I will tell you, it will not be in Austin. Once I have a signed contract, we will be putting save the dates out, but it will be next summer, probably in July as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So when you start thinking about housing, oftentimes when we do presentations and we talk about housing, we say, where's your son or daughter going to live in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? And a lot of times the families are like, they're going to live with us their entire life. But what we know as parents is we may not always be here, or our sons and daughters have their own dreams. And as parents, we have to figure out how to support them. So thinking about where would be the perfect place for your child to live away from you. And when I talk about away from you, I'm going to talk about some different scenarios. It doesn't mean they have to live, you know, across town. Like, there's lots of variables that families have figured out how to set up for their son and daughter that works for them. And these housing situations that I'm going to talk about today, some of them are families who have their son or daughter has significant needs. They need 24/7 care. And what that looks like. Some of them are higher functioning and they need less support. So again, we just hope that you can start thinking so you're not caught off guard if your son or daughter says, I want to move out, because maybe you have another child that's moving out and your child with a disability is like, I want to move out too. So planning and transition, we always talk about planning. So this is your way to kind of get started on trying to plan in a thoughtful manner, so that when the time comes, you know what to do. You have a plan and you're not like freaking out and super anxious. Like, you have a plan. Okay. Next slide.
Cynda, we have a question. Will I benefit from this webinar if I'm a child that cares for a parent with a disability?
I guess it could give you some ideas for the future if you're not the one providing the care. Again, this is really just to get you to start thinking and some of the tools that you need. So maybe some.
And also, I want to mention that on our YouTube channel, we had a residential experience panel a couple of months ago, and that recording does live on our YouTube channel, where we had multiple providers of residential facilities that each came up, you know, for 3 minutes, and they said who they were, where they were, who they serve, and how much they cost, and whether or not they take waivers. So that already happened once, but we actually have another one scheduled because there were so many providers we couldn't get them all in one webinar. But we have another one that is coming up October 26th. So you may want to mark your calendars for that. And listen, because it's a good way. It's like speed dating, because you don't want to waste your time, you know, learning about stuff that is not a good fit for you. So 3 minutes, quick, fast, and in a hurry. And at least from an hour webinar, you have narrowed down a couple of places that you would like to go deeper with and reach out to them directly.
So some assumptions, where would you want your child to live? You would want it to be a place that you yourself would want to live. Is it in the community? We don't want them segregated. We want them integrated into the community as much as possible. Rosemary, who actually wrote this content, who has a housing setup for her son, Will, who has significant needs. She always said that, you know, when you're talking about as a parent trying to set up some sort of shared residence, the more people you have, the more complicated it gets. So she always said, stick with no more than 3. And you'll learn a little bit more about why that's the recommendation as we go through this. But we also want the home to reflect the preferences of your son or daughter. And we want these homes to be not business ran. We want the families to have input on what their day looks like, what furniture they have, when are they coming and going. So that's where these shared residence that families are setting up are helpful, right? Because the parents have more control. If you go to a dedicated community, which there are some beautiful communities out there, there's cost associated with them. And, they have the routines and things that they're doing. When you have a family run shared residence, the families are in control. Next slide, please. So a great way to get started is going through a person-centered plan with your son or daughter. That's a planning meeting where you find out the likes and dislikes, what support your son or daughter needs, what's important to them, what's important for them, how much support do they need. And here's a link if you want to learn more about person-centered planning, but we really think that that starts kind of the planning, dreaming process of what would that house look like? What kind of supports do you need to have in place for your son or daughter to be successful? Next slide. We also at Texas Parent to Parent, what we know is as parents and our kids are getting older, we get tired, right? And so one of the things Rosemary was very adamant about is how does she set up a community for her son, an intentional community that can help support Will and his parents in housing or guardianship or Medicaid waivers. So we have a program called Texas Network Connections. It's where we have a facilitator who will run the meeting. They'll probably start off with a person-centered planning meeting, but it's building intentional community. So if the caregiver is no longer there, there are other people who know how to support your son or daughter. So it's providing that good life for the parents when they're here and when they're no longer here or able to provide the care. Next slide, please. So parents who have already gone through this process, their first recommendation is go slow. Again, plan it out. Don't just jump into something. Make sure that you create a plan, you have that vision, you have steps to getting closer to that. Building relationships, again, at Texas Parent to Parent, we're connecting families with each other who have done this type of housing so that you're hearing from another parent. And as parents, we're very honest with each other. We're not going to sugarcoat it and say, oh, it's super easy. It's not. It's a time consuming. It can have costs associated. Like there's a lot of things to consider. So we really want to connect families together. One of the things that we're doing at Texas Parent to Parent is transition action group. So it's where a group of parents who have housing goals for their son or daughter can start working together as a group. So they're not doing it alone. So those are available with Texas Parent to Parent. But we also want to understand what kind of time commitment is, what does it take to move your child forward into whatever level of independence is possible for them. Next slide.
Is there a such thing with kind of the matching and the collaboration that you guys are doing where you're matching families that could potentially, their kids could potentially be housemates, like for families that are looking for, is that some of the collaboration that's going on?
It could definitely be that. We are getting ready to launch our first housing tag. And because it's going to be virtual, it will be families from across Texas. But we also know that there may be some families in the same area. So that is definitely a possibility. But what we know is the more connections you make, the more relationships you make, your outreach is better, right? Like you learn about what other people are doing and you're building those relationships that can help you through this process.
I just have one other question before we move on. One of the issues that, that I hear time and time again, and I know you do too, is finding that the house mom or, somebody that is going to be there, that's not the parent or whatever, Do you have any recommendations or networks that you know have been successful for other families if they're trying to create their own shared housing, but they do need a house parent per se? Do you have any recommendations on that?
So again, through networking, at parent to parent, we get these calls all the time on how do we set up housing? We don't want the traditional thing. We want to set it up. The parents are committed, but they need a place to start. So we would try to match them up with parents. There's a housing organization that is starting in the Austin area where the mom, her son was coming out of a residential setting. She knew she needed him to live away from her. And so she started her own nonprofit and is working with families, trying to figure out how to build a community in a particular neighborhood. So what we see a lot is families are taking this information and they're doing it themselves because again, they want a different setting. They don't want, something that's already established because that can be expensive, right? So they try to figure out how they can do it where it's cost effective for them, where their son or daughter is happy, where they're in the community. So networking is huge. It's huge,
That's the thing, it takes a village. And I've learned so much just, we provide a lot of information, but just the different groups that I've personally have participated in and just from other families and professionals just in and around for sure. And we have two things in the chat box that I'm not sure about. Somebody said housing tag ? And then
So
the other person said,
okay,
go ahead with that housing tag.
I was going to say, if you contact our office, you should see my email, or Adriana works with me and I believe she's on this call. Adriana, can you put your contact information in the chat box? That tag is we're in the forming process of that housing tag. So reach out to us and we'll get you connected. And I think I kind of didn't really answer that house mom thing. Again, it's through connections, but special ed teachers, like instructional assistants, maybe people from your church, maybe, it depends on really what you're looking for. People that are going to college and they want a place to live. What we know is housing is so expensive, right? And so, looking at all of those, so from colleges to people who are social workers, special ed majors, all of those are really great starting places. Community colleges, if they have a job posting board, sharing with all your friends, this is what you're doing. Do they know anybody that might be interested? So really just getting the word out and thinking about those people that really have a heart and want to work with people with disabilities is a great way to get started.
For sure. And then the other thing that we had in the chat box is, what about assistive running?
Assistive running?
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm not sure what that means.
I'm not either. So for the person that posted that comment, if you'll give us a little bit more details on that, we can address that. And then we have, is it a good idea for each family to provide the house or adult for 1 week per month, alternating between 3 families? That's an interesting idea. I kind of like that idea. I hadn't even heard that.
We've seen that.
This is already good ideas coming out.
We'll talk a little bit more about kind of how it could look. I'll tell you about different scenarios of what families have done. Anyway, so we'll touch a little bit more on that, but if you need more elaboration, we can definitely talk about that.
So I think the person said she was meaning assisted living, kind of. So if we have a loved one that has higher level of care needs, is it possible to create this shared housing in that example as well?
Of course it is. You just have to be creative. The possibilities are endless, right? That's where you're going to plan. You're going to figure out what kind of supports they need. Do they need? So here we are. Are they going to live alone? I can tell you with technology, families are able to provide their son or daughter with a little bit more independence because technology is amazing. Do they need a caregiver or a family member? Like, what kind of supports do they need? Do they want other roommates? And again, do they want no support, or can they be alone, during the day, but they need somebody to be there at night just to make sure that they're safe? So again, I want you to think about the possibilities that there's not any situation that couldn't be adapted to your son or daughter. Again, these models have been put in place from people with significant support needs and minimal support needs.
Yes. So when it comes to, and I'm not a gloom and doom girl, but also I think that as parents that are, thinking about this, as we're going through the decision process, we're trying to think about and process the things that went right and the things that went wrong for other people, so we don't duplicate the wrongs. I don't know if you're going to talk about those some a little bit. I hope that you'll share some of that with us, even if it's towards the end of the presentation.
Yes, I will touch on that shortly. So working alone obviously is going to be easier, but it's going to cost more because you're solely figuring out how to fund that residence, whatever that residence looks like. Working with other families is cheaper, but what you have to understand is you're going into a relationship with another family. You need to make sure that your son or daughter, that they're compatible with that other person. As parents, you need to understand the parent and what their level is. We know a situation where two families were doing a shared residence. They entered into it, everything got started, but what they realized is one parent was trying to be a little bit more hands-off, where the other parent was a helicopter mom. It didn't work. Ultimately, it didn't work because they just didn't fit together. Their beliefs, their ideas, how they felt the support should be given, it didn't work. So a huge consideration is, are you compatible with that other family? Because you're going to be working closely with them to set this up. Okay, so very important to consider.
I think some of the compatibility issues, so you've got the parents' compatibility, but then you've also got the residents that quite honestly have some behavior challenges sometimes, whether it's mental health, whether it's, impulsivity or some of the other things, some of them cleanliness. There's so many other factors. So the parents could get along beautifully and our kids might not. So
exactly.
Those are big factors.
Those are all
well.
things that you have to take into consideration. There's a group called Adults Independent and Motivated here in Austin. That organization was created because one of the daughters was moving out to go to college, and their daughter with a disability said, "I'm moving out." And the parents went, "Whoa, we weren't prepared for this." But they very quickly went out. They found a model that they liked in Kansas. They brought it back. Their sons and daughters are living in an integrated setting into the community in apartment settings. The parents are very involved. They do activities. But one of the things that they put in place because of that was you have to date their program for a year. You have to be involved in their social activities. The parents need to be involved so that they get to know each other and find out if you are truly compatible. I don't know why I keep saying compatible, but compatible is actually the word. So that's something to consider too. Like, take some time, get to know people, see if, can your sons and daughters go to activities together? Do they generally get along? How are the parents interacting with their son or daughter? Right. So that's a great way. Like, start this process.
Tell us that website one more time. And Adriana, will you put that in the chat box for us too, please? It's
called Adults Independent and Motivated, also known as AIM. There are some great videos on AIM. I know they've been on the news before. And just share it. Like, when they started, they went running, man. Like, I saw them at the beginning. They've been in existence, I want to say 8 or 9 years. I don't know how many people they have living in there, but I think they have a good core group of 10 to 12 people with disabilities that are all interacting with each other. So again, that's something to think about. I mean, that's a great concept of don't just jump into something, figure out how to get to know them more personally to see if you would be a good fit or if your sons or daughters would be a good fit. Next slide.
Okay.
So then how are you going to fund it? Are you going to rent a home, condo, or apartment? It gives you more flexibility if you're just trying this out to see how it's going to work. You're going to buy a home or condo. That's going to be more longer term. Or are you going to stay in your family home? Are you going to put a tiny home in your backyard? We know a family who put a tiny home in their backyard and the parents moved into the tiny home because they knew it would be too hard of a transition for their daughter to move. So it gave them both their independence, again, with supports for the daughter. We know people who have petitioned off parts of their garage and that becomes an apartment for their son or daughter. So again, they're still close, but that's giving them, that's their apartment, that's giving them their level of independence. We've seen families buy houses next to each other where their son or daughter lives next door with support, but the parents, again, are really close. So the possibilities are endless. Of course, depending on what you're going to do, whether it's renting, buying, you're changing your house setup, you need to look at all of the aspects of that. You know, there's legal stuff that needs to be considered and all that kind of stuff. The Medicaid waiver program. So if your son or daughter is lucky enough to receive services through one of the Medicaid waiver programs, you have to learn about the waiver programs because they each have different rules about a support person living with the person with the disability who's receiving services. So I can tell you HCS has a lot of rules on who can live with who, to where class is more flexible with who can live with who. So you're going to have to dig more into those waiver programs and find out what their rules are. We know families who are utilizing services through a Medicaid waiver program, and like somebody mentioned, they have one attendant that comes in, they stay for a few days, then they go home, another person comes in. So it doesn't have to be one person all the time, but looking at the different funding, what are their rules and how can you utilize that to help with that creative housing option?
So we have some questions in the chat box. I think that this question, is there one in Texas? I think she was talking about AIM, and AIM is in Texas, correct?
It is in South Austin.
South Austin. And again, in our residential program, panel, we do have a lot of other options, and some are more independent than others or semi-independent. And there's a lot of options all across the board. So I do suggest that you take a look at that. We had someone mention earlier, I didn't forget you, that like, what about when our kids are aging? We're dead and gone. Our kids are aging. They're moving more towards needing a higher level of care or long-term care. So is that just basically a kind of a planning, that goes into consideration when you're creating your home, or we're creating this home for as long as the individual has the ability, and then we have a plan B for long-term care later in life? What do you think about that?
Again, that's part of planning. Again, you're having to look, as parents, what we know is we have to be looking long-term. We have to think of all different scenarios of what might happen. Because again, it's not just going to happen. Like if you don't have a plan, say you've created this residential option for your son or daughter, you have a personal network in place. That network is also overseeing to make sure that, if you're not able to provide the care or provide the support, you have a personal support network. You have people that want to make sure that your son or daughter has a good life and that they're taken care of in the way that makes them happy, that they're safe and healthy. And so you have extra eyes on it, right? Because as parents, oftentimes we're like, we've done it alone forever, right? This is just what we do. They're our kids. We're going to support them regardless of how old they are. But looking longer term, what can you put in place now? Because we don't know what the future holds. So really planning and looking at What are the possibilities out there? Again, personal support networks, I can't tell you. In Central Texas, there's a lot of them. We're expanding our program to other areas of Texas because we really believe everyone in Texas should have that. It provides peace of mind to the parents, to where you know that there are other people going to be looking out for your son or daughter and know how to keep a house setting, understand their funding. So, for parents, one of the hardest things about a personal network is kind of that letting go, right? We've done it. We've been doing it, right? So kind of letting go and let other people get involved is highly recommended.
I think that's it is highly recommended, and the right thing to do is probably also one of the hardest things to do for sure. And I know
trust me,
you've got kids yourself, and I know you know. We have a question. Is there like someone or an organization that we can hire that would work with us on developing our living plan? Can we work with your organization? Do you know of any that are reputable, affordable, or good that you could recommend?
Off the top of my head, I cannot think of anybody specifically or an organization that is doing this, and that can take you through the steps. I know there's an organization, I don't remember what it's called, but I think they're doing bigger housing communities and not these more specialized for your son or daughter. We can help connect you with families who have already put something in place, or you can join a tag and learn alongside everybody else. The tag that we're getting ready to start on housing, the facilitator is a parent who has set up a separate living situation for her son. She has a house in her backyard that's his. It gives them each their space. He's higher functioning, so that wouldn't work for everybody. But you can reach out to us, and we will give you as much information and support as we can.
And we can put the financial piece into play, because what happens, Cynda, is that mom and dad are going to spend 25 to 35 years in retirement. So they have their own retirement to be thinking about funding when we're thinking about funding care for our loved one as well. I mean, the dollars and cents, and does this add up, and does this make sense, and how can we do it, and where can we pull it from most effectively is definitely things that we can help with. But another consideration that somebody put in the chat box is that we basically don't know when it's going to become necessary for our daughter to move into housing without us. So planning is difficult since we're not ready now unless something catastrophic happens to us. And do we have suggestions, if we're looking out 5 to 15 years? And what I will tell you from my perspective is, first of all, you are very much not alone. Every single day, somebody calls us and says, hey, we're not there yet. We're still hopeful and optimistic, and we haven't quite arrived yet, but we basically want to plan for the worst and hope for the best. And that's basically what we advise people to do, is plan for the worst and hope for the best. And when the best happens, it's great. You just have a more lucrative retirement, okay? But if the worst happens, then you've planned for it and you're not struggling in your own retirement to make ends meet. And so that's typically, our suggestion there. Now, would I tell you to run out and buy a house for the future idea of 5 to 15 years from now that you might need it? I probably wouldn't do that, but I would be getting kind of the ducks in the row of planning for the worst and kind of, planning financially that this is a kind of within the realm of possibilities. Do you have anything that you want to add to that, Cynda?
So again, planning, we can't stress that enough. And it doesn't matter if it's going to happen today or 15 years down the road, but doing your research on what the possibilities are to where you would have a plan that would activate in the worst case scenario. And that you're not planning in crisis mode. What we know is if you're planning in crisis mode, that's not the best way to plan. So again, this is not something, as it was recommended from other families who have done this, go slow. Think about the possibilities, what would work for your son or daughter, what is feasible financially. And again, this is also where a personal network could follow you along in that 15 years. And if that terrible, awful happens and you're not able to provide the care, they know what to do. They have the blueprint. They know what the wants and dreams are They make sure that your son or daughter is taken care of. So this isn't something that we think you should run out and do tomorrow, right? We want you to put thought into it because there's a lot of considerations, as well as what Allison said, the financial aspect of it, right? So do your research, learn what the options are, figure out what it might look like, talk to other families, do your research, and just start putting your vision together is where I recommend you start. Because as parents, none of us want to think about the fact that we're not going to be able to provide the care, but that's just one scenario. Again, your son or daughter comes to you and says, I'm moving out, and you're like, right, and you're not prepared for that. You never thought that they would say that they're going to live with me forever because that's just what we're going to do, but they have their own visions as well, right? And so we have to be mindful of that. And as Allison, letting go is so hard. We can sit here and talk about it all day. Letting go in little steps, whether it's send your kid to camp for a weekend, like baby steps. We don't expect you to, put them in camp for a week if they've never been away from you, right? Start in baby steps and move forward from there. Understanding that they all have different unique needs, different support needs. So each home is going to look different. But if you can learn what the basics are to get started and to build that vision, I think you're on the right path.
For sure. One thing I wanted to mention, there was a question in the chat box of when should I apply for SSI and Medicaid, and that's a slippery slope, and we have lots of webinars on that. In general, a lot of the families that we serve, they don't qualify for SSI and Medicaid prior to the child turning 18. They simply either make too much money or they have over $2,000 assets in their name. So while it is true that some people do qualify for SSI and Medicaid prior to the child turning 18, it is based off of the asset limits. It is a means-based program, so I want to let you know that. So, but I also just want to mention to you, because a lot of our families go 18 years and their kid never qualified for anything, so it didn't occur to them that when the child turns 18 that they should apply, right? Because it's been going off of the parent's income and assets all these years, and when your child turns 18, it's based off of their assets, not yours. So right now, SSI is $841 a month, and I'm telling you this because SSI is designed to help defray some of the cost of food and shelter. Okay, so I want to let you know that. And then furthermore, it's a whole other webinar, but furthermore, when we have a child whose disability started prior to age 22, they have the ability to be kind of on our shirt tails for our Social Security disability or our Social Security record. So when we retire as a parent, we retire or we go on disability ourselves, our kids are eligible for 50% of our benefits. So they'll basically switch over from SSI $841 a month to the RSDI. So in the example that a parent's Social Security benefit is $4,000 a month, their disabled adult child whose disability began prior to age 22 will be entitled to $2,000. So there's some ifs and buts and family maximums, but what I'm telling you is that once your child turns 18, if they've been getting no money all this time, there's a high probability, depending on their diagnoses and things like that, that they will qualify for benefits in the future. And we can go deeper with you on a personal level on that if you have more questions.
Can you go back to the slide before the Medicaid waiver programs? I think it got skipped.
Okay, this one.
Yeah, so this is where SSI, SSDI, because you're trying to build a basket of funding, right? So SSI, SSDI, the waiver programs, food stamp. So not just looking at disability related services, but low income services as well. There's subsidized housing because of low income, special needs trust, family funds. Is your child working? And are they going to have roommates? So really looking at all those financial aspects and figuring out what can pay for what do you need more money for is part of the planning process. So sorry, I think we skipped that one. I don't know how that happened, but okay. So then the Medicaid waiver programs, I'm good with that slide. And then can you go to the next one after that?
Yep. Here we are.
So contacting your, no, okay. So just
There
some
you go. Sorry.
resources. No, there we go. Doing your research, talking to your local authority to see if there's any funding for housing. Navigate Live Texas, it is a website that is it is actually funded through the state of Texas, but everything on that website, Texas Parent to Parent, we are their partner on that website. So all of the content has been reviewed by a parent. So there's more than just housing, there's transition, there's videos. I highly recommend you check out that website if you've never seen it. The ARC of Texas, and then there's independent living centers. Some of them, they're all around the state. Some of them have different housing programs that you may be able to access as well.
There's also a site, Reality Check Texas,
Yes.
too.
Yes.
So when we have our kids that are adamant on getting out no matter what, that reality check really kind of talks about some of the finances and what do they need to have to be successful, what kind of job, how much money do they need to make and what it's going to take.
Yes, that's a great website because it tells you how much you have to make and what could you afford in rent and what do it goes through all of that. So it definitely is.
It's really good.
Yes. So here's some links to grants and home loans for people who have a disability and their families. I am not going to go into depth on any of these, nor can I answer any questions on these. It is a resource for you to explore. But just to know that there are opportunities out there that could help with buying a house, if that's the route that you want to go. So check these out. You'll have a copy of this PowerPoint, so you'll be able to click on those links and learn more.
And some of that is like basically first mortgages or whatever without a kind of a higher, you won't be paying a higher rate if you have a loved one with a disability. So there's several programs out there. And I don't think that those are in wide circulation, Cynda, so of people knowing about this. So this is a good way of knowing. And a lot of times when they're not in wide circulation, even your loan officer, because they don't do this ever, they might not know. So they might be learning with you as you explore this, but they definitely do exist.
Mm-hmm. There's also a program called Section 811. So it helps people who have low income with disabilities with long-term services. And so it's a lower amount for rent. There's certain properties. Section 8 housing vouchers. There's a wait list. As we know in Texas, everything is a wait list. So you might explore the Section 8 vouchers as well. So again, opening up your thinking to not just disability related funding, but look at low income as well. Because once our sons and daughters turn 18, they're looking at their income and not the parents. Okay.
There are also programs through the social services, not Social Security, but social services. So if the individual basically says they do not have a place to live, there are actually programs that may not be Section 8, but they'll do a 50%, or they may cover 400 of the rent for 6 months or something while they're getting on their feet, but they do actually have to have a job. They can't be unemployed and doing that. Do you happen to know about how long the wait list is in general for Section 8 housing?
It varies from county to county. So find out when, like, they only open the wait list, and I believe it, and I think all of them do it this way. It's some sort of lottery type system. So check it out. The other place that we often go when we're looking at housing stuff is there's a website called findhelp.org, and you can pull up housing, the particular area that you're looking for, to see if there are any programs in that particular area that your son or daughter may be able to access. So findhelp.org.
Got that. Will you put that, Adriana, will you put that one in the chat box as well too, please?
Okay, so we did it. We got through all of the slides. Again, remember, this is just to get you thinking and putting together a plan and talking to other families to see what the possibilities are for your son or daughter. We are here to help you, and feel free to reach out to me. Here's my email, my phone number. Again, we're all parents. We're here supporting each other. We're a community working together. We know that we need as many people involved. So please feel free to reach out to me and I can see how we can help you more.
We have a few other questions. We have someone saying that they have a child that has bipolar and now in full psychosis. That is problematic. You know, we have a mental health crisis in this country everywhere, and it is increasingly challenging to find housing for that. Do you have any recommendations for families that might be dealing with that, Cynda?
The 811 voucher.
The 811 voucher.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It has to be referred from an agency that's approved to do that, but like the local mental health authorities in each county, they should be, don't quote me on this, but they should be signed up to be somebody that could refer to the 811 program.
Gotcha. So then we have something else that says on one of the slides, we talk about the financial resources, and they would imagine that they may need to talk to an expert on the impact on the amount of your disabled child receives for SSI. Is there ways to shelter that money? So this is, I mean, again, this is a loaded question. So a lot of families understand that SSI is designed to pay for food and shelter. And if your child is not paying for shelter, then there's a 1/3 reduction to your SSI. So instead of getting $841 a month, then the individual gets $561 a month. So if you have a rent or a fair share agreement in place that the child is paying rent, even if they're living in your family home, then they're going to be increased to the $841 a month. And the bottom line is there a way to shelter that money? And there's two places that are legal and good that you can put money above and beyond the $2,000 limit for SSI. And that is an ABLE account. It's under the tax code 529A for ABLE. You can put $16,000 a year and an additional $12,880 if the individual is working, and it grows tax-free, and this tax-free withdrawals as long as those withdrawals can be construed as achieving a better life for an individual with a disability. You can also have an unlimited amount of money in a special needs trust, because you never want your ABLE account to be over $100,000 or you'll disqualify for SSI and Medicaid, but you can have an unlimited amount of money in a special needs trust. But one tricky little thing that you do need to know about the special needs trust is if the special needs trust is paying for the food and shelter, then there would be a 1/3 reduction to the SSI. So it's very complicated and convoluted, but the key answer to your question is a special needs trust is your friend and an ABLE account is your friend. And why we need a special needs trust, or both, basically you can't leave money to an ABLE account. So like in the example that the parents pass away and they want to leave their life insurance or they want to leave the home, you can't leave that to an ABLE account, but you can leave life insurance proceeds, other assets, property to a special needs trust. And once that's left to the special needs trust, it will not affect their state or federally funded programs. So that is really, really important. We have entire topics on that matter. So we've got the Texas Reality Check in the chat box. We have got the findhelp.org. And what we're going to do, somebody mentioned that they couldn't copy and paste the chat box. We're going to get all these links that are in the chat box, these websites that we've mentioned during this presentation. We will get that when we send you the email with a copy of the slides and a copy of the recording today. We're going to have those links in there as well. Let's see if we have any other questions. Is there a sample written plan that could be shared? So we are sure to include all the critical elements. And that's a great question. And there's actually a document that Cynda provided.
Yes.
It's a how-to guide. And a kind of a step-by-step process. And we are actually including that today in the email that we're sending out to everybody. It will be in a PDF. So thank you for reminding me of that. We're definitely doing that. Mm-hmm. Someone says, this is a good question for you, Cynda. Do you know if Mdcp allows a non-related adult to be a respite provider and live with the disabled individual?
MDCP lives with the person that has MDCP and is providing respite? I believe the answer is no, because respite is meant to, well, if you're the primary caregiver, the answer would be no. If you're a family member and you're over the age of 18 and you're providing respite and the primary caregiver leaves, then I believe the answer is yes.
And we get questions all the time about when can you be paid as a caregiver, and that's typically once the individual has turned 18 is when you can be paid to be a caregiver. Okay, we got lots in the chat box right now, so hold on, bear with me one second. Someone said that one of the Texas waiver programs is also specifically for individuals having psychiatric issues. There is something called the YES waiver, and it's a pretty good waiver, and it is one of very few that don't have much of a waiting list. It's probably increased now since COVID, but prior to COVID, most counties did not have a waiting list for the YES waiver. It is by county, but this is a wraparound program for mental health, 19 and younger though. And so think of I call it the alphabet soup of diagnoses of mental health. There could be addiction issues, runaway issues, behavioral issues, and then all of the diagnoses. But the YES waiver is that. So that is worth checking into, and there is a possibility that there is not a waiting list in your county. So for those of you that don't know, can you discuss military benefits, SBI, and the Special Needs Trust? So I have worked with the military a lot in the past, and specifically, having benefits, whether it's TRS or if it's the military, if it's pension benefits, you do want to make sure, this is kind of some of the beneficiary information is pretty important to understand, that we don't ever want to leave our kids, our special needs kids, directly named as a beneficiary on anything. We want it to go to the Special Needs Trust for the benefit of said child. So if we have benefits, and I can't control like what the military says or does. So if the military doesn't allow it to go to a Special Needs Trust and it can only go to an individual, there's multiple things that you can do. But if it goes directly to your disabled child, the option is to hire an attorney and have it redirected to a first-party special needs trust. Then there would be a Medicaid payback. So it's less than ideal if you don't have a family member that you could leave it to that would turn around and put it in a third-party special needs trust without a Medicaid payback. So that's kind of a convoluted path.
Anytime you're talking about benefits, regardless of what they are, it's messy. Like there's lots of things you have to know.
Okay, can people with physical disability, not a mental one, establish a special needs trust or an ABLE account? And the answer is yes, you can. For the ABLE account, the disability had to start prior to age 26, not to be confused with the disability starting prior to age 22 for the disabled adult child benefits, now called childhood disability benefits. So it's age 26, the disability started before for an ABLE account. And then yes, for the special needs trust, any type of physical, mental, it could be intellectual. There's so many different types of disabilities out there, so it doesn't kind of really discriminate for that. Okay, we've got the link for Navigate Life Texas, which is a great website that also talks. So if you want to know more about the waivers, we do have a webinar completely on all the waivers in the state of Texas, so you can find that. But the Navigate Life Texas also does talk a lot about the individual waivers that are out there, who they're for, what the deal is with each of them, because it does start running together. If you don't know, if you've never heard of it before, if you're new to Texas. Can you leave your money to a private corporation to purchase your home and collect rent? And do you have anything about that in the guide, like having an LLC about that or anything like that?
No.
Okay. So, and we would recommend that you work with an attorney or a CPA on that, but we actually definitely have seen people where the property is owned by an LLC. We've seen it owned by the trust. We've seen it owned by the parents, multiple parents. So those are all options. And that's part of your discovery when you're kind of looking at this and looking at what your options are, what might be the smartest thing. But a lot of the people that go down the LLC route is so they can't get sued. And that's where, again, the attorney will come into play and kind of talk to you about what your options are and what might be the smartest for what you're trying to accomplish. Okay, can a non-family member be paid through a host home after a child becomes an adult? I don't know the answer to that.
Yes.
Okay, they can. And what is the process that they go through the waiver and their caseworker for that?
There would be paperwork that they would have to do. They would actually that provider would become the host home person. So you would have to contact your local authority, find out what the process is to have another person be the host home for your son or daughter.
Gotcha. We've got someone in here that said that there is a mainstream choice housing vouchers that are worth looking into, and they are specifically for people with disabilities. So she mentioned that. Thank you for that. And she said that they may have mainstream choice housing vouchers. And she says that they have shorter waiting list and they are offered by the local housing authorities. And someone asked, how do we go about setting up a special needs trust? You work with an attorney for that. And we say this is not a DIY project. You want to work with an attorney that is nuanced in special needs. We have attorneys that we have worked closely with all across the state that we know and trust. And I know your organization does too, that we know that they know what they're doing and that their fees are fair and things like that. So if you ever want a referral, reach out. We'll be happy to provide that. And I don't know the answer to this. Does the military have a rule that you cannot own your own home, that survivor benefits require that someone own the disabled son or daughter's home? I'm not sure about that. One thing that I do know about the military that is worth mentioning is that you can keep your disabled adult child on your military benefits basically indefinitely if their disability started prior, to a certain age. But there are specific forms that you have to fill out and you have to ask. They don't usually bring that to your attention. And if you miss the boat, you're a day late and $1 short and you just don't get it, is basically how that has worked. Okay. And we're just about out of time. We've got a few more. Can you elaborate on what you recently mentioned about how after the child turns 18, the parent can be paid to be the caregiver? Is this through the Medicaid waiver programs or is there another process, Cynda?
It's through the Medicaid waiver program. So under HCS, once your child is 18, a parent who lives in the same household could apply to be the host home provider, which means you would get paid a daily rate based on your son or daughter's level of need to provide all of the care for your son or daughter. You could also take that money and hire somebody else to do it, but I can tell you it's limited funding. Under class, once your child turns 18, then a parent or caregiver living in the same household could be paid as the attendant. You have like in my case, my daughter is the CDS employer and I am paid as her attendant and we live in the same household. So that's why I talked about learning what the different rules and the waivers are, because when you're looking at housing and if you're using a waiver, you have to learn what the rule of that waiver is because they have different rules to them.
And Cynda, the bottom line is they can reach out to your organization.
Absolutely.
So if they have specific questions that we couldn't get answered today, that we didn't get through, they can reach out, because I know that there's a lot of, being paid as a caregiver and HCS questions and things out there. One person asked, does our child get Medicare and it's usually 2 years. So once a parent retires or goes on disability, if their child is 18 or older and disabled, then they'll be eligible for Medicare after 2 years. They'll have Medicaid, then they'll be dual eligible, basically Medicaid and Medicare. So you guys have asked a lot of wonderful questions, and we definitely have webinars. Like somebody said something about guardianship. I do want to ask that because I actually don't know that answer. So one family said that they've started the process for guardianship. And so does some of the things that we've talked about, if they have guardianship of their child, does that change everything?
It changes some things, particularly if you're trying to be paid as a caregiver.
So can you be paid as a caregiver if you have guardianship or not?
Yes, but you can't do consumer directed services. You have to go through an agency. So you would be hired through an agency. It's usually a couple dollars less than the consumer directed service model. But you can. And absolutely, if you all have questions, I wasn't looking at the chat box, just FYI. Allison, thank you for taking care of that. So I didn't have to do that. Again, at Texas Parents Parent, we are here to support you, answer any questions you have. We know this is a lot of information, but the hope is you're starting to think about it and what the possibilities are. And then can you throw in the poll? And we have one.
Yes, we've got one last poll I would like to put up. Let me see. Let me drop that. I'm going to just launch the most recent poll. And while you guys are doing that, we've got just some updated things that should be on your special needs planning radar. And these are things that we have webinars on all of these topics on that YouTube channel. So we just, you guys have asked great questions today. So thank you for not being shy, and thank you for putting things that you've learned and along the way to help some of these other families. Truly is a community. So thank you for your participation. But check out our YouTube channel. And if you want to connect with us directly, we'll have a link in the email. This is a link to us if you want to schedule a free consultation to talk more specifically about your unique situation. You can reach out to us directly. And we'll have these links and our contact information in the email that is going out later today. So thank you guys for answering our poll. I'm going to end it really quick and then share the results here. So thank you again, Cynda, for taking your time to be with us today. Thank you guys for sharing your lunch hour with us. And we'll get that email out to everybody this afternoon.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Take care. Bye now.
You too.